So now I want to switch to our main topic, which it is another news story, but I think it carries a little bit more weight than the simple fact that it is in the news. I don't want to just give my uncredible take on this. I mean, I'm kind of going to do the same thing, but I wanted to spend a little bit more time on this because I think this is I think this is interesting from a regular person's perspective in the you know my subtitle for the main topic is through an uncredible lens. And I think some of the stories that were lost during the COVID years, the COVID lockdowns, the COVID shutdowns, I think the biggest stories that were I wouldn't say muted or ignored. I would just say didn't get. I mean, some people did get out there, but like a lot of the big news stories from COVID were more about like nurses, which those are uncredible people. Don't get me wrong on that. Business owners, um, political figures, communities, but it wasn't like your average worker. What happened during COVID? Like we knew it was happening because we all lived it, but the way the media presented it, those stories were few and far between, and again, you can't get them all out there either. Um, but I remember people being more concerned about things like business owners closing their businesses than they were about the employees who work for those businesses. Now, there were times where we were thrown this bone for essential workers, right? Like people who worked at like fast food restaurants and things like that. Those people were allowed to keep their jobs, and so there was a sense in which some upper to middle class people were sort of the targets of this. But this past week, a lot of clips, you probably saw them. I was going to put clips on, but everyone's doing it, and I'm like, if you didn't know this was going on, just look up Fauci. But Rand Paul, by the way, this story's crazy. Rand Paul somehow obtained and released Dr. Fauci's personal diaries. Now, I remember I was listening to Dave Smith on this, part of the problem, and he was laughing about the fact that Dr. Fauci even kept, like, he goes, who keeps a diary? And I was like, yeah, seriously, like, what's weird is that they call it a diary. Like, why not call it his notes from the COVID time? Like, why are we calling it a diary? Because, like, to me, I think everybody thinks of a diary as like something a young kid has, like a locket. Like, it's not that, but he was definitely keeping track, of like, it's more like captain's notes, which I guess is a diary of sorts. But I noticed Fox News was making fun of, like, they had this like little cursive, like pink cursive Fauci's diary, Tony's diary, that's what it said, in cursive, and it was like they're kind of making fun of him with that, which is not necessary. It's funny, I get it, it's hilarious, but like the diary thing is weird. And you know what struck me as strange is so he goes before Congress to testify. And we've all seen the video clips. I think he pled the fifth over 100 times in this hearing. Did not say anything other than, at the advice of counsel, I plead the fifth. He just, he had an opening statement, and then he just pled the fifth the rest of the way. But the in his opening statement, before he started pleading the fifth, he says that Rand Paul has released unredacted my personal diaries. He called them his diaries. Like, and his legal team. I'm going down the conspiracy rabbit hole in my head right now, and I'll share that in a minute. But I just got done talking about how it doesn't matter. Like, and this is the biggest example of why I came to that conclusion. But it's like, his counsel sat down with him and said, like, here's, they constructed this written letter so that he would say word for word what was on the letter, don't deviate. Those conversations were had. And he's reading this, and he calls them his diaries. Now, me personally, I keep a journal, right? I actually don't keep it. I used to. I have a journal. I don't really. I should write in it. I don't. I kind of consider the Uncredible Substack and this my journal, you know. But you would think that if this joke about how we released your diaries, like treating him like a little schoolgirl, that kind of like vibe to it, you would think that when he wrote his statement to present to Congress, that he would say like, "Oh, Rand Paul has released my personal notes or my journals or my day-to-day thoughts on what was going on." He calls them his diaries, which maybe I did look at them, but I'm like, this is a weird thing. It's funny he said that Rand Paul released his unredacted diary entries. Like, but why? What diary? So weird. By the way, Rand Paul is absolutely epic for this. But I was thinking about this, and as I was watching this trial play out, I thought to myself, this is all political theater. It's all political theater. There's one point where Fauci says in his opening statement that Rand Paul is obsessed with him and is trying to make good on his promise to, quote, put Fauci behind bars. And I remember listening to that statement, thinking to myself, nobody's getting put behind bars at this level. Behind bars. I mean, think about that. When was the last time, and maybe my knowledge is so far gone that I am, in fact, uncredible. When was the last time somebody went to a congressional hearing and then ended up behind bars? Remember how big of a deal it was when Donald Trump said to Hillary Clinton, you know, if I was in charge, you'd be in jail, and lock her up. These people don't go to jail. They don't go to jail. Like even if Fauci was convicted of mass conspiracy and the deaths of millions of Americans, and like even if we went like I was talking about at the end of our last segment, like even if the best case scenario for the people who are mad at Fauci, he doesn't end up behind bars. He ends up in some cushy like facility. You know what I mean? Like it wouldn't be the jail cell that you're picturing in your mind. And that gets me back to this whole idea. This is all political theater. And the real question, which will probably never be answered, is why? Why and why now? Those are the two big questions. But as I was looking at it, I remember when the whole Thomas Massie thing happened here I think it was a couple months ago, where they went hard in the paint to get Massie out of office, and they primaried him. He lost. He's still in office, but a reporter came up to Rand Paul and asked about the Thomas Massie situation. For those who don't know, Thomas Massie and Rand Paul, pretty similar political views. They take a lot of hard stances in the similar ways, and Rand Paul had nothing to say. He's like, not commenting on it. And Rand Paul has been oddly silent on the Epstein files as well. And that's not a conspiracy thing. It's just you see Thomas Massie as sort of the face of that push, so to speak. And when this came out, and I was watching Rand Paul do his thing, part of me thought that maybe Rand Paul was sort of like, I'm just going to do my thing. I'm going to stay elected. I'm going to try to do things behind the scenes quietly. But seeing Rand Paul address Fauci the way that he did and run this hearing, it occurred to me that Fauci's not entirely wrong. Rand Paul has probably put a lot of his energy and focus on this one thing and getting it right. And I think there's a lot of legal loopholes involved here, where in order to get Fauci on anything, they're going to have to be very specific. And I think the way this hearing went, or I don't know what you would call it, this testifying before Congress, I'm not really even sure what that is. You've seen Zuckerberg do it. You've seen all these people do it. But in the end, it's all political theater. Nobody ever gets – what they do is they yell at the person and never do anything to them, right? So but as I was watching this, and I thought, boy, Rand Paul has gone – he's spent a lot of time making sure he gets this right. Whether Fauci's right in terms of being obsessed with Fauci, that's not the case. I think Rand Paul is genuinely frustrated with the fact that Fauci questioned his credentials in terms of being a doctor back during COVID, questioned his intellect, questioned his honesty and integrity. And I don't think Rand Paul's letting that go away. And I think he's going to use the law to make sure this gets dealt with in some way. Now, I go back to this is all political theater because no one's going to jail. And you see all these clips of politicians berating Dr. Fauci and asking, like, there was the one guy who was like, what color is your tie? And, just all kinds of ridiculous things. And then Fauci would respond at the request of counsel or at the advice of counsel, I plead the fifth, blah, blah. And then one by one, these congressmen yell at him and berate him. And they're all kind of just cutting clips for their next election, right? So what they want is they want to be able to say on paper that they sought for justice for the families of those who died during COVID under Fauci's, whatever, however they frame it. That's what they're looking for. I mean, there might be a general sense in which they are looking for justice, but I think we all know there's no real justice to be found in the way our justice system works. And when I say the way our justice system works, it doesn't work the same for these people, for people at this level. And that's where I got into sort of thinking about the meat of what I wanted to talk about today. And this is why this isn't necessarily in the news, but it's more about looking at the world through an uncredible lens. Dr. Fauci, all this stuff that we're seeing, same with Pam Bondi, that was another one where she fumbled the Epstein files and then had to testify before Congress. These people do not act the same as us when we're in trouble, like when we do something wrong. They're not treated the same way. I watch a lot of these clips where people exercise their First and Second Amendment. They'll go around with a camera and they'll stand on the sidewalk. People get mad at them for filming, and then it turns into a thing, and then the police show up. And the way those law enforcement officers act towards those people, us, the uncredible, regular folks, is altogether different than the way the justice system works on TV and what we're watching. And I've seen some people now who are doing these memes where they it'll be like, hey honey, where did this new kit to fix the muffler come for? And it'll be like, at the advice of counsel, I plead the fifth, right? So I'm not going to incriminate myself. So it's kind of like a joke. But what's not a joke is that if you try that as a regular person in the world, it doesn't go the way it did for Fauci, right? You get held in contempt of court. You might actually see yourself behind bars that day. They might walk you out of the courtroom right then. These people get away. I remember watching the Pam Bondi thing and thinking, how does she get away with this? If you've ever been in a courtroom, like for family court, for anything like that, that is not the demeanor you're supposed to go in with. Like they typically want you to be quiet, or a lawyer will tell you to answer honestly. I'm sure in more serious cases like this, they say don't say this or don't say that. But it got me thinking about our justice system and why does it look so different for the elite class than it does? Like why are they able to do what they do when the scope of the damage they cause, given the positions they have, is infinitely greater. I mean, I'm fully on board with what Rand Paul is doing. I'm fully against what Fauci did. But Fauci wasn't the only one who did it. There's so many more people involved, and that's why I say this is political theater. But I totally agree with him being held accountable, but he's not going to be. And it's like, if I murdered somebody, or I'm trying to think of a way that would make sense in terms of an illustration, but if I was in trouble for something, my trial's not going to look anything like this, right? I'm not going to be questioned like this, right? In two ways. One, You're not going to berate me for the cameras when I plead the fifth. And, I've seen multiple times where people are on the street and they want to, exercise their right to not give over their license because they're not convicted of a crime. And then they end up face first on the ground because the cop doesn't know the law. Like, can you imagine that kind of law enforcement in this scenario, right? Like I said, it just got me thinking that the justice system operates differently for different types of people, and by types of people I mean elitist versus regular folks. And that injustice is frustrating as a regular person. As I look at the world through an uncredible lens and I go, oh, it works differently for you. You can profit off of the death of millions of Americans. You can make tons of money, and this is your consequence. You just have to sit there and read a note for, like, he's not going to have any consequences. It goes back to what I talked about, I think, in one of my earlier episodes. I think it was episode 7, which I've been trying to get the clips out for, where I talked about how, actually, I think it was in the clips I just did for episode 4, where I talk about how this cycle where, this is actually pretty quick for COVID to be addressed. But look at Fauci. He's already got all the benefits, all the money, all the financial setup that he needed from the crime he did. And he's not going to be held accountable in a way that's going to take any of that away from him. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he will. But, the justice system just works altogether differently. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention was, as I was watching it, I kind of thought to myself, it's the one guy who got this like blanket pardon is the guy that Congress is bringing in to talk about these things and to testify. He has a pardon. Now, in one sense, that makes sense, right? So he has a pardon, so he doesn't need to plead the fifth, so he can talk because he's pardoned. But on the flip side of that, there's so many other people, companies, organizations, CEOs, Pfizer, Moderna. There's so many other people who are complicit in the same way or worse, media companies, CNN, MSNBC, hosts who there's so many. Governors. I have a list here. I have governors, business owners who required, just the list goes on and on. It's like there's so many people. And using Fauci first as the mascot to roll these things out, and now using him as the mascot that what do you call it? The punching bag, so to speak, of the Republican Party to take responsibility and be the face of, quote, justice for what happened during COVID and all the lies that were told and all the BS that was spread. Sure, he was at the head of it, but there were other people. I have in my notes Deborah Birx is fascinating to me because how is she also not involved with this somehow? She was part of the same group. She wasn't as upfront as him, but like how is she not also being pulled in front of Congress? And she doesn't have a pardon, so she's actually somebody that you could address. Now you'd have to do, Fauci said that Rand Paul is just obsessed with him. Well, kinda. Like if Rand Paul spent as much time on Deborah Birx as he did on Fauci, he might find the same things on somebody who's not pardoned. So it's interesting to me that we've sort of picked Fauci. Now Fauci was the face of it. It's kind of like if you're actually a perfect example. So a lot of people are mad about the Buffalo Bills' new uniforms. This is gray and blue, and Josh Allen comes out and says, "Hey guys, I really like the uniform." What's he gonna say? He's the head of the Buffalo Bills. What's he gonna say, right? But he kind of represents the whole team. So I guess in a sense, Fauci gets to be the fall guy, but he's a fall guy that can't be prosecuted, that can't be jailed because he has a pardon. So he's kind of a weird choice for this. And that brings me back to, this is all political theater. It's political theater because all these people who are cutting promos basically on Dr. Fauci they're not trying to get justice. They want justice, and I think they're genuinely passionate, but what they really want is they really want either a piece of that pie, they want to be vindicated and be told that they are right, and they want to get reelected at the end of the day. And that's really the strongest motivation for all of it. And unfortunately, that's how our system works. And, I guess I should be happy that Dr. Fauci's being addressed, but at the same time, I was looking at this no differently than the Charlie Kirk thing. It's all entertainment. Like it's a show they're putting on to project that they're just, project that they're doing the right thing, project that they're doing something when they're doing nothing. It's weird. So, like I said, one thing that's a scary thought, and I was thinking about this too, because I think a lot about my news feed and how when I settle in on one particular item, how it gives me more of that. And one scary thought I came to is, and I want to talk about the Democrats' response to this as well, but it occurs to me that there is another feed out there of people who still think that Fauci was right. They got the vaccine. Maybe they got 10 vaccines or whatever. Like what is made fun of by people that I agree with and the things that I see on my feed, the algorithm that I'm sort of woven into because of the things that I click on and the things that I watch. There's another algorithm where there's people who are like, I can't believe the Republicans are after the science. It would be fascinating to see what Bill Nye is saying now, because that jokester was pushing the masks harder than anybody and claiming it was science. But I believe that those people still believe that heavily. I don't think, and the reason I say that is during these fires, the Canadian wildfires, we had the low air quality, and literally, they went back to some of the COVID protocols immediately. They fell back on that, where they were like, oh, you should wear your mask if you're going to go outside. You should shelter in place. All these terms started to come back out. I'm like, you went back to that too easily. And I have in my notes, I was like, what's scary is that, yeah, sure, we're addressing Dr. Fauci and we're saying bad Dr. Fauci. But at the end of the day, some of the things that snuck in that are going to stick around and will be reused again are masks, 6 feet, shelter in place, emergency use authorizations, emergency powers. The next time something like this happens, they're going to go, oh, we did it during COVID. And they're going to say it as if what's happening now with Fauci isn't happening. We fundamentally determined that it was all a lie, right? The vast majority of it was a lie. Everything was inflated for the profit of elites and people high up in the medical community to profit off of. We know that for a fact. That's where we're at. The problem is we're only targeting him to kind of say, oh, we agree, so I'm on that side, but without ever actually doing anything. Like no hospital CEO that instructed their staff to put people on ventilators or to mark a checkbox so they could get a little bit more money, mark a checkbox with COVID. None of that's being addressed. That would require work and effort and real justice, and none of that's happening. So yeah, and then I said I was going to address the Democrats. The thing that stands out to me as fascinating, and I think Rogan, I didn't see it, I saw a clip literally this morning, but Rogan was talking about how I guess the CNN was saying that this isn't that big of a news story, whatever, but the Democrats have been oddly silent on this whole thing, and they were the ones who pushed it the most, I think. They were some of the bigger actors, and I think the reason you're not hearing a whole lot out of them is because they know they were wrong and they don't want to get implicated, so they're just going to let Fauci be the fall guy. They're not going to support Rand because that would be high-fiving the Republicans, and that would screw them up with their base. But they're also not going to, they're not going to stand up for Fauci because he was wrong, and they don't want to be roped in with that. So it's kind of a weird balance there, but. I put in my notes that this is really, for any young Democrat who's coming up through, it's really a softball for them to hit out of the park, and they're missing it. You just have to go, look, what Fauci did was wrong. Families were hurt. People, you could use, the Democrats love to do this. You could use the sentimental side of, some people didn't get to see their grandparents pass away. Some people saw their grandparents and thought that it was safe when it wasn't, because the vaccine wasn't as effective as they said in keeping it from spreading. All those things you could jump on and then sort of bolster your case for saying, hey, I'm bipartisan or something like that. And you don't see a lot. I don't see a lot of that at all. Maybe I should do some actual search it up. But after all, we are uncredible. But as I look at the world through an uncredible lens, and I was looking at just the average person, even if, like I said with the previous conversation, it's like, even if it's true that Fauci did all this for his own profit, his own gain, his own pride, his own celebrity, and he gets convicted and he gets put in jail, nothing will be made right. The nurse who lost her job during COVID because she refused to get the COVID shot because she was afraid of COVID injury, doesn't get her job back. Even if she gets her job back, she doesn't get the pay that she lost, right? Like, none of that gets made right. So what? At the end of all this, at the end of the rainbow, what is there? There is a politician, Rand Paul, and all these people who berated him, who have clips that they can use to get elected again. And no justice was served. The people who are primarily responsible and who held the power are them. It's like standing up for what's right 10 years later. Well, thanks a lot. No, that's not to say Rand Paul was standing up against it before, but he was ineffective then in stopping it. So as much as it might be nice to see Dr. Fauci get what he has coming to him, at the end of the day, what does it really matter? And so I also put on here, I said, Republicans are going to use this to say they stood up and got justice for the wrongs done during COVID. Democrats are going to ignore it, and they're just going to plow forward, and they're going to miss the low-hanging fruit that is a win for them. And let's see, what else did I put here? In the end, the regular guy, the uncredible, they have to continue to march to the orders of an incompetent, immoral ruling class, and that's kind of it, right? Like, because at the end of the day, the people who are evaluating Dr. Fauci are the people who listen to him. That's lost on them. It's like, okay, so Fauci had no authority. He had no power to shut down governments or lock down people or mask. So it's like, you guys did have the power. You had the power to say, we don't want to listen to Fauci. We want to listen to somebody else. We think he's wrong. While other people were being censored, the people who had the authority and the power exercised it against us, the uncredible people. They did it to us. And somehow they're going to then sit him in a chair and berate him when they were the ones who acted on his information. Right? It's like, okay, so Fauci profited, but he profited because you let him. So who's really on trial here? Who's really responsible? And what's just quietly being missed is the fact that this ruling class, the entirety of it, I would say the entirety of it, the majority of it, was as responsible, if not more, than Dr. Fauci, because he was just one guy. And the irony of the whole thing is that he was Trump's guy. Good luck getting that through the MAGA people who are berating him. Like, he was your guy. Like, this is like, how are you? It doesn't make any sense. So yeah, that's my look at these Fauci hearings, or what is it, a hearing? I don't even know what it is, but that's my uncredible take on just what I saw. And I think I don't think there's any solution to bringing justice to a ruling class that is solely motivated by staying the ruling class. And that's what we have in the U.S. Okay, convict Fauci and then step down because you followed his advice when you had guys like Joe Rogan putting people who are being silenced like Dr. Malone on his show. It's like, yeah, you're the hero, you're the just one, despite the fact that you were the one who had the power, authority, and intellect to look at Fauci and go, hey, bud, no, we're going to go a different direction here. But you didn't do that. And specifically, you all didn't do that.
No quit. Building their wall. While they talk about us. All they talk about us. Educated. Experienced. Still not credible. So we embraced it. we're incredible.